Welcome to Zain Khan Live, where everything is discussed and nothing is censored. Today, the topic of our program is changing the nation through education. Today, the guest of our show is Dr. Bilal Philips. He is a prominent academic, a PhD Islamic scholar, and also the founder of International Open University. Welcome to our show, Dr. Bilal Philips. This is Zain Khan. It's such a pleasure having you on our show, sir.
Barakallahu feekum. It's my pleasure to be back on your program again. And we can only pray that the program is of benefit to our viewers, our audience, inshallah, and will be put on our scale of good deeds in the time when we'll need it most.
Inshallah. So the first question, you're the founder of an incredible online university. I'd like to ask you questions regarding education and how it positively affects the society. What is the philosophy of education according to you?
Well, when we look at the definitions of education, and there are many, the philosophies are expressed in these various definitions. And the one which I felt best summarizes what is education is the one which states that education is the transfer of the culture of a civilization to its next generation. That sums up the essence of education. It's not just the facts and figures, the dots and the dashes. It's the package, the whole package, which represents education. Education is not devoid of the cultural context in which that information is being conveyed.
No.
So if your civilization is a secular civilization, then the education that you will be given will be in accordance with the principles of secularism. But if your education comes from an Islamic civilization, then it should be expected that the same bits and pieces of information which are conveyed in the secular educational system will also be conveyed in the Islamic system, but with an Islamic cultural bias or Islamic cultural understanding.
Speaking of secularism, and I'm glad you brought it up, now, when we look at, there are two sorts of subjects. If we look at theology, or, that's religious. If we look at, in the Islamic perspective, we look at hadith sciences. That's an Islamic, it's an Islamic studies subject. But if we look at other subjects like sociology, we look at psychology, and your university also teaches, it offers a degree on psychology. When it comes to these subjects, do you personally believe in the secularization of education? If not, why? If yes, give us your reasons.
Well, the secularization of education was a product of the secularization of the civilization itself, of governance. When governance involved in the 20th century, the global removal of the influence of religion on education. So right and wrong, your morality, your ethics, your system of character building will be one which is devoid of critical elements necessary to create complete human beings who are morally driven, who have a sense, a real sense of right and wrong, which is not just based on what is convenient. So the secularization of education came after the secularization of governance. And we know what happened with the secularization of governance. You know, all of the things which are considered sinful prior to the 20th century, whether it's fornication, adultery, and all the other well-known sins, these were secularized. They're no longer sins. So once you've removed the stigma, then people can do anything, and they don't have that sense of right and wrong. Right is what is convenient, wrong is what is inconvenient. Whereas from the Islamic perspective, then right and wrong has a basis in revelation, divine guidance, which determines ultimately what's right and what is wrong. So as a civilization, the Muslim civilization, the empire of faith, which existed for 1,400 years, though weak today, still has at its foundation the same ethical principles guiding the educators and the educated in today's world as well as in the world to come.
Dr. Bilal Philips, you've rightly pointed out your perspective regarding this, but I want to ask you a question. Now, you have subjects like computer sciences, we have subjects like psychology. Now, how do we unsecularize them? Do we start teaching what Al-Ghazali's opinion about a certain thing was regarding psychology? How do we teach that to our kids, if not by secularizing it and talking about Freud and other psychologists? How do we teach that to kids from an Islamic perspective, sociology, psychology?
Well, these subjects are taught with the guidance that exists within the Quran. We could write about the psychology of the Quran or the sociology of the Quran, where we analyze psychological and sociological principles in the light of Islam and Islamic teachings.
But we also study Western philosophies as well and concepts regarding psychology?
No harm. Of course, we should. We don't want to teach the students only half of the picture. No, we have to teach the whole picture. And when we say that one aspect of sociology or psychology is not acceptable, we have to explain why. Why is it not acceptable?
We have to give arguments.
Yes, they should understand. They should not just be denied. For example, let me give you an example in another area, which I've discussed at length before with others. In the area of business administration, business management, when marketing is being taught, the instructors of marketing will inform the students, the secular instructors, that the best salesman is the one who is able to sell snowballs to Eskimos or sand to a desert Arab in his tent living in sand. This is the ultimate salesman. He convinces that Arab sitting in his Bedouin sitting in his tent that he has some sand which that Bedouin must have, even though he's sitting in a sea of sand. So we say, yeah, that is a real salesman, you know, or the Eskimo in his igloo. He's living in a house of ice. His bed is made from ice, you know, and here comes somebody selling him a snowball, you know, some ice rolled up into a ball, and he's going to buy that ice because he feels that his life is incomplete without that ball of ice. You know, that's a super salesman. But how does he manage to do that? How does the salesman manage to do that? He must deceive that Eskimo or the Bedouin. He has to deceive him. He has to lie to him. He has to create an image which is false so that he will be convinced to buy what he doesn't even need. So from the Islamic perspective, deception is forbidden. You cannot falsely advertise your product. You have to tell it like it is, with the negative, the weaknesses, whatever, you clarify. This is what made Muslim business people unique and caused Islam to spread through business, through trade. Muslims who had been trading in the East, from Arabia, from Africa, going to India, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, they had been going prior to becoming Muslims for centuries and centuries. And they traded in the normal way of trade, which involved that deception. However, when Islam came, and these traders now were obliged not to cheat, not to deceive, not to conceal and hide the weaknesses of your products, etc. Those people who they dealt with, their business partners in these lands, were shocked. Why? You're selling me cloth and you're telling me where there is weakness in this cloth. Why? Because maybe I won't buy it. They say, well, obviously I'm selling to you and I'm giving it to you at a cheaper price. So if that is what is most important to you, then you will buy it with its, defects. So otherwise you can go to my neighbor who is selling along with me and get cloth without defects. They say, wow, oh, what caused you to do this? And of course they told this was Islam. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Man ghashana falaysa minna. Whoever cheats us, whoever deceives us, is not of us. It's not a true Muslim. So that principle, how we have included in the process of marketing and sales, and this is going to affect the whole process of how we market our products. In the same way, we can go back to psychology and other fields, whether it's banking and finance or IT or wherever, and include the ethical principles which Islam is governed by, which summarizes the essence of the message, as the Prophet ﷺ had said, I was only sent to perfect for you the highest of moral character traits. So morality has to be there. It needs to be in every class. The professors who teach in my university, the International Open University, I insist that everyone who is hired understands this principle, that in every class they should develop some element of moral principles. Moral guidance should be there. It should not just be an exchange of information. There should be beyond that. How is this information to be used? When is it to be used? When is it not to be used? Etc., etc.
Dr. Bilal Philips, when we study the history and philosophy of science, we learn that the Muslims were on their peak in Islam's golden age. What was the reason of their regression? Was it lack of education, lack of rationality? What's your opinion on that?
Well, Allah talks about, the change of power and dominance of societies as something which takes place in accordance with His destiny. So behind it all is Allah's destiny. But what is obvious to us is that when the Muslim states, or the Muslim state, Muslim empire, began to crumble as a result of internal corruption, then the Muslim world became dominated by the non-Muslim world. And in the dominance of the non-Muslim world, they extracted all of the scientific, useful good from the Muslim world, put their scholars' names on it, and erased the Muslim contributions from the books which were used for general teaching. Of course, in research, this information still remains there in most institutes around the world, but it's just not accessible to the mass of people. So Muslim contributions to civilization were written out of the textbooks. That's why, alhamdulillah, in the beginning of the 21st century, in the UK, they did a major festival, or we could call it a major event, which was dedicated to highlighting the contributions, Muslim contributions to world civilization, especially in the fields of the sciences, etc. And from it, they made a book called 1001 Muslim Inventions, which every Muslim should have in their home, this book. They have a kids version and an adult version. And they even have a DVD on it. I mean, now it's can be saved without DVDs. That's the days of the DVDs. The point is that they gathered together scholars, etc., who explained all of those contributions, how they contributed, when they contributed, who learned from them in the West, and who took over there, where they left off, and all of that. They've brought all that information there. And as such, today, there is no reason why any Muslim child should grow up without knowing who Al-Hassan ibn al-Haytham is. They know Zainuddin Zidane, football player, big time, became head of club, etc. But they don't know who Al-Hassan ibn al-Haytham is. And he was the genius of optics. He described the workings of a camera. He showed it from way back in the 12th century. He was dealing with things that were way beyond his time. He described how the eye worked. He had taken apart the eye, looked at all the parts and pieces and set up artificial versions and showed how the light was refracted and all kinds of things. Incredible stuff. We should know him. But we have a generation now who are graduating who have no idea that Muslims even contributed. They know Sir Isaac Newton. They know Einstein. They know Madame Curie. They know and they know and they know. But the many Muslim scientists, scholars, etc., they don't know. So we have to rectify that. We have to bring them back in contact with their history of science, so they understand that Islam is relevant.
I totally agree, Dr. Bilal Philips. I mean, Imam Ghazali's Kalam cosmological argument is still used by a Christian philosopher of the name of William Lane Craig. And to fathom the fact that a philosophical theory that was by Al-Ghazali is still used in 2021 to explain the existence of God, that is an achievement by Muslim philosophers and thinkers. I want to get to the next question. You're an academic. You are the founder of International Open University. In your opinion, what is the importance of education for an individual, for a society?
The world UN analysis of the differences between the developed countries and the underdeveloped countries concluded in the UN analysis that the difference between the two is in education. That is the essential difference. That if we in the Muslim world, in the developing world, are to come on par with the developed world, the only way is through education. There is no other solution. And that is why the motto of my university is changing the nation, that is the Muslim nation, the Ummah, through education.
Dr. Bilal Philips, many motivational speakers consider degree-based education to be outdated. We even see intellectuals and philosophers like Noam Chomsky, who considers institutionalized education to be outdated and of no use in the future. And those intellectuals consider skill-based education to be the future, especially after COVID-19, skill-based, where you learn how to either fix a car or make shoes or make a software, skill-based training. What is your opinion on that? Do you still consider degree-based education or university to be relevant?
Well, of course, I believe that the degree-based, that is academic study-based system of conveying information and knowledge to be relevant. Not to say that in the future there may be a shift, where new ideas are coming up. The mode of education may change. We may give another name to those who graduate. Rather than calling them PhDs, masters, or bachelors, we may give them some other name, which is indicative of their practical, hands-on, skill-based learning systems, But in the end, it's just a matter of names. And if we say, and as we're trying to do in in IOU, that we do want our graduates to be relevant, to have the necessary skills to provide for the gaps that are there in the society, or to provide guidance to the society in one way or another, based on their skills, the skills which they have gained through internship, which is why we have included this element as much as possible into our various departments, linking up our students with the industry, global industry, in the various fields that we are educating them in, that they do have more of a hands-on understanding than a purely academic understanding. Like, you go back 50 years and you look at the textbooks where they're teaching science. There are a lot of drawings and explanations, written stuff, and many places didn't even have laboratories. Now, in the West anyway, all the schools have laboratories with all the chemicals and all the, so you can see this is an evolutionary process ongoing anyway. But did it make that knowledge which those who studied without having access, hands-on access to the scientific experiments and experiences, did it make their knowledge less relevant? No, for that time that they were in, it was useful. When things evolved and schools could all afford now to have laboratories, then the level of education moved up, and that is hands-on from simply what was in the textbooks before. So you can see that trend happening, and that people become more involved. The concept of internship, is spreading through many different areas of study. That hands-on experience being important, but it doesn't eliminate the theory behind it. Still, just dealing with things as they come without understanding the whys, whens, hows, it's not going to be useful. So it's purely experimental or purely skill-based? No, can't be. It will always have a theoretical foundation which those who are studying have to have. It's like fiqh. If you're only going to deal with the circumstances in which fiqh is applied without understanding where the foundations of fiqh came from, then you will always be dependent on others. You will not have the ability to do ijtihad and to develop other alternatives or answers to new circumstances that arrive. So this is, I think, plain reality, which educators know well.
I want to get to a very technical question. When I study philosophy, and that is my subject, I understand in the realm of ethics and moral philosophy that without religion, a person cannot attain objective moral values. Objective moral values. What do you think is the relationship between morality and religion? Now, for example, if somebody is an atheist, we can go on and argue about what is moral and what's not. And eventually, a person who doesn't believe in religion would eventually attain a position of moral relativism, that nothing is right and nothing is wrong. It's all perception. It's all cultural based or perception based. But religion is what gives us objective moral values. So, in your opinion, what is the relationship between morality and religion?
Well, you said it. I agree with what you said, that, unless the one who decides what is morally right and what is morally wrong is not from among us, where we are looking at everything from a subjective perspective, then our morality will be in constant flux, which is what has happened to the West. When they removed the Bible and the teachings, Christian teachings which guided the morality of the society, when they threw that out and said, well, we will just, then morality went. It just became whatever was convenient, whatever the majority agreed on or preferred, and as such, what can be right today can be wrong tomorrow, and what's wrong today can be right tomorrow. That's where you end up, and that's what we're living today.
This is a very important question, and I know that our viewers would want to know. Like, let's imagine I want to join your university. Please tell us a little more about university. If somebody wants to join, or if I want to join, how could they proceed? And what are the major courses that you are offering in the university?
Well, joining the university is pretty straightforward. It's just going to the website, iou.edu.gm, and everything is there. Everything opens up for you. You choose your area of study. Of the areas that we have, 7 or 8 areas are Islamic based. So we have Sharia, BA, Master's, PhD, taught in English medium with Arabic as a subject, which the student has to take, and which is combined with a bachelor's in Arabic. The students can take with English help in explaining the language, bachelor's and master's. That represents the purely, we could say, Islamic, or Arabic, you could say, is not necessarily Islamic in and of itself, but it's taught within the context of Islam. There will be examples from the Quran or from the Hadith and things like this to show and to teach the various principles, grammatical principles, etc. Then the modern subjects, we could call them modern subjects, or some people want to call them secular subjects, but we don't teach them, from a secular perspective. Though we do look at the secular perspectives, we have education. And what is being taught in our Department of Education is what is normally taught in any Department of Education around the world, but from an Islamic perspective. So the Islamic connection will be developed there. So students studying will understand. They will see something of the prophetic method, prophetic approach to education. And if we move on to banking and finance, well, it's Islamic banking and finance. These both areas, we have bachelors, developing masters currently. And the Islamic banking and finance, alhamdulillah, is addressing a critical need in the Muslim society today to deal with the challenge of riba. And I should go back to education just to emphasize that this is also a very, very important area, as Muslims to a large degree have neglected it today. So many Muslim schools I've visited in countries which are multicultural societies, where half or more of the teachers are non-Muslims in the schools. Why? Because they don't have teachers, Muslim teachers. Why? Because teaching is the subject that people go to when they can't get into anything else. And this is terrible, because the Prophet ﷺ had said that the whole world is cursed except for the teacher and student. And what was he but a teacher? A prophetic teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. So we have neglected this field, and it needs to be revived and lifted up back to its position of honor, which it had in the earlier generations.
Dr.
But
Bilal,
moving on,
these are like very interesting subjects. How much is the degree? How much does your university cost? And are these degrees globally recognized? Like if in Pakistan, I want to do a degree from your university, if I like one of the courses, is it recognized?
well, technically speaking, the university is accredited as an institution, as well as its courses are accredited in the Gambia. So technically speaking, it should be accepted, the degrees should be accepted worldwide. However, some countries have conditions. For example, in Pakistan, the University Commission there states that for an online institution's degree to be accepted in Pakistan today, the same subjects which are taught online must also be taught offline in a branch of that institution. It must be taught offline for the online to be acceptable. That's a condition they've made. Most countries in the world don't have this condition. So what do you do in such a case? Well, don't stop at the initial degree level. Make sure that if you graduate with a bachelor's from us, which will be Islamized, then you move on to a master's, do the master's in Pakistan. So you've gotten an Islamized foundation on which to build your master's from. Your eyes would have been opened, your mind would have been cleared, so you can understand our advice, because there are institutions around the world where our degrees are accepted as online degrees, and they teach also offline, and their degrees are accepted in Pakistan. So what I'm suggesting, just to clarify that point, is that if you did the bachelor's with us, then you would do your master's with one of the universities. For example, in Malaysia, Asian E-University recognizes our degrees and accepts our students in their master's program.
It's a very big university, one of the most recognized universities.
It's one of the top universities in Malaysia. And so From there, you want to do your PhD, you can bring it back to Pakistan and do your PhD in Pakistan because Asian E is accepted. So you may do it, following those steps.
How much is this? How much does the degree, these courses cost? How much does your university cost?
We could say that the standard price for a 4-year degree is $1,000. Not per year or per semester, but total $1,000.
That is not expensive at all.
That is it's virtually free in many countries in the world, but not in all. Obviously, there are some countries where the fees are very low, but it's lowest of the low. And we do have it scaled because though you may pay 1,000 in Pakistan, for the same degree, somebody in the US pays 4,000. Still, 4,000 is very low. Still, 4,000 is very low. So the idea of getting a degree in the US for $4,000, people would laugh. I mean, you pay more than that for one semester. So it's scaled according to the UNESCO breakdown of nations and their GDPs and etc. We scaled the fees accordingly. And we do have scholarships for those people who can't afford. We have thousands of students studying with us. For example, in Africa, we started 3 years ago, we started a project to provide 1 million scholarships to African youth. Because in Africa, less than 10% of those who graduate from high school find places in university. So because education is so critical, as we said in the very beginning, it's very important. If we're going to change, the conditions for a billion people there on the African continent, it has to come through education. So we're trying to provide, the means through scholarships given across the continent to needy students who normally would be eligible for zakah. So we're trying to bring that segment of the society up to be a part of the future for the countries of Africa. And we have extended similar programs in other parts of the world. I wanted to do it also in Pakistan, but because the position of the accrediting body is such that they wouldn't accept our degrees, then it wasn't possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bilal Philips, for being on Zain Khan Live. It was such a pleasure having you discussing education.
My pleasure. Alhamdulillah, may Allah make it beneficial to all who have viewed it. And we hope to be with you again in future programs for the sake of Allah and in service of the Ummah.
Inshallah. This was Dr. Bilal Philips, a prominent academic, a PhD Islamic scholar, and also the founder of the International Open University. We were discussing how to change a nation through education. Until the next episode of Zain Khan Live, keep on watching Zain Khan Live. This is Zain Khan. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Take care. Goodbye.